anong opinion nyo about sa sinasabi nilang nagiging super elite class daw po ang LGBTQIA plus community compared to the rest in terms of passing the SOGIE bill?
Ayan. So thank you so much for that wonderful question. So indeed, ever since unang final yung SOGIE Equality Bill noong 2000, year 2000, yan talaga yung tanong na binabato sa amin. Bakit kailangan pa ng SOGIE Equality Bill? Hindi ba nagiging special and elite class yung LGBTQI community?
Meron ka bang gustong pag-usapan?
Gusto mo bang dumagdag sa mga usapan laban sa progresibong bayan?
Pag-usapan at pagtsikahan natin yan.
Student Council Alliance of the Philippines presents
Usap Tayo, the podcast.
podcast.
Kaya wag na natin patagalin pa. Ako ang Baby Cakes na nagsasabing magpabakuna mula sa Laguna. I'm Cheska.
And it's your boy Ruben, been there, done that.
Ang lalaban para sa karapatan at kapakanan ng mga hayop. I'm Natalie.
Tara,
usap tayo.
Hello guys! Magandang araw mga ka-USCAP! Ito na nga matutunghayan na natin ngayon ang pinakaunang episode ng ating podcast series na Tara, USCAP Tayo. At ang theme natin ngayon ay swak na swak sa selebrasyon ng Pride Month ngayong buwan ng Hunyo. So, para umpisahan ang podcast na ito, bakit hindi nyo muna kamustahin natin ang ating mga kasama dito, no? Hi Nath! Hi Ruben! So, kamusta naman kayong dalawa?
Masaya naman kami. Ako, masaya ako.
Parang di ka naman masaya dyan. Ayan, okay lang naman, nahinga-hinga. Kahit daming ACADS workloads.
Pero siguro pag-usapan natin, kamusta naman yung celebration nyo ng Pride Month? Paano nyo ba sineselebrate muna yung Pride Month? Nung umpisa, bago mag-pandemic, paano kayo nagsiselebrate ng Pride Month?
Ako, sige. Ako, kasi this year lang din ako naging open na I'm part of the community. So, this year lang din ako natanggap ng mom ko. So, pre-pandemic, hindi ko siya na-celebrate. I just send messages sa mga friends ko na part din ng community para, alam mo yun, alam nilang may alay sila. Ganon. Like, hanggang ngayon pandemic, ganon. Parang ina-assure ko na it's okay if hindi ka pa ready na mag-out, ganyan. Okay lang yan. Just take your time. Tsaka na paghanda ka na. Kasi kahit naman ako sa simula, hindi talaga siya naging madali. Kasi syempre nakakagulat din sa family natin, ganyan. Pero ayun, that's how I celebrate Pride.
Mm-mm. So ikaw naman din, ba't hindi mo naman i-share sa amin kung paano ka ba nag-celebrate ng Pride Month?
Ayan, di ba ngayon, since online yung nagiging platform natin ngayon, napakalaking bagay nung online world ngayon. So parang I made my social media accounts a safe place for our brothers and sisters in upholding this advocacy. Kasi kapag alam ng tao ngayon, 'di ba binubuhas nila yung time nila ngayon sa social media. Tapos if they see that this person is sharing this one, reposting this one, dun pa lang parang magkakaroon na sila ng idea na ito parang safe ako dito, valid yung nararamdaman ko dito. So that's what I'm doing right now. Kasi sa totoo lang parang when I entered college talaga, dun ako parang na-open talaga kasi sa mga sumali ng mga orgs, mga political orgs ganon. So parang simple act of kindness lang, malaking bagay na sa ibang tao. Kahit sabihin mong maliit lang sa'yo, malaki na yung impact niya sa ibang tao. So I think that's how I celebrate Pride.
Ayan. Totoo nga yan. Actually, ako kasi, I was raised sa isang conservative na family. So, nung una talaga, yung four walls of our home lang talaga yung pinaniniwalaan ko. But then, nung high school ako, pasok ko sa UP Rural. And then, pagdating ng senior high school, doon na kami sa UPLB pinag-school. Yung mga classrooms doon. Kasi lagi nung classroom namin, si Oble. So, doon nakikita ko, nung pagdating nung June nung malamang Pride Month. So, nung June na yun, doon lang ako na-open. And of course, syempre, may mga may mga classmates ako na it's okay to be part of that community. It's okay to be part of this community. And then, ayun, I eventually told my parents then, actually nag-out ako sa kanila na, Mommy, I'm part of this and please accept me. At doon nga, nagulat nga ako na pwede pala natin silang i-educate. So, simula noon, sumasali na ako to educate people, not through imposing, but of course, through sharing it through my social media, yun nga, by joining SCAP. And then, just recently, I volunteered with what Venus has started, initiated, the Balwer Kanlungan. And then, ayan, siguro as we go through this podcast, makikilala pa natin lalo yung isa't isa. And of course, share natin sa audience natin kung ano nga ba yung gusto nating ituro or ipakita sa kanila. So, bakit hindi nyo naman i-explain sa audience natin, sa mga kauskap natin, kung ano nga ba itong podcast na to?
Ayun. Since wala nga tayong parang nasa sarili tayong mga kanya-kanyang tahanan, no? Parang we still find ways on how to voice out our opinions and thoughts sa mga iba't ibang issue. And USCAP tayo, the podcast, provides a venue for different student and youth leaders para makapag-contribute tayo sa mga interesting topics and hot issues na umiikot sa society natin para sa isang kolektibong movement into a progressive society. So, bakit nga ba kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy, yung theme natin for the month of June, Ruben?
Ayan. So, di ba, kung kilala nyo si, tawag dito, may tawag sa kanya, si Albert Nicolas sa Facebook. Nakalimutan ko yung tawag sa kanya. Basta may tawag sa kanya. Tapos ayun, nakikinig lang ako sa mga podcast. Tapos nung narinig ko yung podcast nila, tapos nakita ko yung mga, kilala kasi siya sa Facebook na nagpo-post ng mga witty captions, like parang for example, at the end of the day, gabi, ganon, yung mga ganon pang witty questions. Tapos, statements. Tapos may nakita ko sa kanya, ayun, kinuha ko sa kanya yung idea na parang, kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. So parang ni-reiterate lang yung kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. Tapos, nag-iba yung impact niya. Tapos inulit-ulit ko ba, so kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. Like, oo nga, no, parang, witty siya, pero iba yung dating, iba yung impact. So why not, kunin natin to, gano'n. Tapos, yung pasok siya sa team natin ngayon, which is Pride nga, gano'n. Tapos, kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. Which is, an individual who is happy sa mga ginagawa niya. Masaya siya doon. So, ano pa natin doon? Valid yung nararamdaman niya, gano'n. So, kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. So, that's our thing for today. Doon siya napunta.
Ayan.
Doon lang siya pupunta.
Ayan. Thank you so much, Ben. Parang agree na agree yung manok na tumitilaok dyan sa inyo,
Ayan.
ano?
Doon siya masaya eh.
Oo nga, doon siya happy. Okay, so to dive in, our topic for today, and of course, para mas maturuan tayo, mas ma-educate tayo, at mas maintindihan pa natin kung ano nga ba yung SOGIESC Spectrum or ano nga ba yung pwede nating magawa rin. Andito ang isang guest natin for today. So she is a queer activist and the third year BA English Studies at University of the Philippines, Diliman. So she has been actively advocating for the passage of the UP SOGIESC policy and the SOGIE Equality Bill by helping organize educational discussions, on-ground and online lobbying efforts, and pride activities within and outside the university. Her capacity as the policy and advocacy head, they represented Babaylan in the first Senate committee hearing on the SOGIE Equality Bill last year and spoke about discrimination in schools against Filipino LGBTQI students. Recently, they co-headed UP Pride 2020, the Pride celebration of UP Diliman. Ngayong hapon ito, kasama natin walang iba kundi ang punong babaylan ng UP Babaylan, si Mix Venus Aves. Hi po!
Hello! USCAP, thank you so much for having me in your first episode. And of course, happy Pride Month sa lahat ng nandito at sa lahat ng ating mga viewers. Ayan. Okay. So I am Venus, as Cheska said. I am the Punong Babaylan or president of UP Babaylan. UP Babaylan, if you don't know UP Babaylan, it is the first LGBTQI student organization in Asia, established in 1993, and we are based in UP Diliman. So what do? Of course, we advocate for LGBTQI rights. We educate the community about what it means to be LGBTQI, and most of all, we serve as a safe space for LGBTQI students in UP Diliman. As Cheska mentioned, I've been involved in the advocacy for 3 years now by helping organize like Kipi Pride, other events, and most recently, we set up Balur Kanlungan, which is an online wellness community for Filipino LGBTQI youth. And actually, SCAP is one of our partners for Balur Kanlungan, and Cheska is one of our coordinators. Ayan. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you today.
So, Miss Venus, how do you feel as we celebrate Pride month this year?
Yeah, of course, always talaga, every June, every Pride month, I'm always happy. I'm always filled with energy and hope. I always feel empowered because I am reminded of the fact that this is a long-standing tradition. Di ba, sa Pilipinas, since 90s, pinaglalaban natin ito. In the world, since the 60s. So I feel the history of my community every Pride month. But at the same time, very sad din because obviously we cannot safely march together on the streets because of COVID-19. And at the same time, andyan pa rin yung anger because of the injustices that our community continues to face because of discrimination, harassment, and violence. Ayan. So a mix of
Okay.
like
So,
happiness and anger. Mm.
so Miss Venus, ano ba, how are you dealing with those situations? Lalo na po whenever our yung kapwa natin is being discriminated, how do you handle those situations po kaya? Or have you ever experienced those situations? Ganyan.
Mm-mm. Yeah, as a queer person, ever since I was a child, so super malamyana, super FM, so I've always experienced microaggressions. Mga maliit na pangungutya, mga pambubuli, etc., etc., on the basis of me being queer. So before talaga, I used to be super affected by those things. Pero ang sad din kasi over time, di ba, parang namamanhid ka na, parang you grow a thick skin and just ignore what other people say about you. But when I entered DP Babaylan in 2018, I realized na as advocates, we should do more than just ignore those things. Kailangan din natin, more than anything, kailangan natin, pinakauna, i-educate ang mga tao. Pangalawa, mag-work towards changing society. So, for example, when people experience discrimination and they come to UP Babaylan for help, we try our best to help them. First, by asking them what they want. Diba? If they want to get access to psychological support or if they want to have legal support in order to file a case. Then, if we know what we want na, we try our best to do what they want through our other partner organizations and advocates in the advocacy.
Ayan. 'Di ba ayan nga yung ano natin ngayon, topic is pasok talaga siya. Kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. SOGIESC 101 sa community. So kung titignan natin ngayon sa Facebook, nagkalat yung mga webinars na ganyan, no? As gender advocate din sa student council namin, ayun, dun sa din kami ng mga webinar ganun. Ngayon, so ngayon naman parang pasadahan natin yung SOGIESC ulit kasi kailangan natin siya talagang parang i-reiterate sa ibang tao kasi alam mo yun, may mga taong alam lang yung word na yun pero pag tinignan na yung pinaka-ilalim, like ganun, nagkakanda-kanda ano na. Kaya parang andito tayo, we are doing this platform to educate them ganun para kasi I've been there eh. Parang bago lang din ako sa mga words na ganun. So naging bukas ako kaya why not tawag dito, why not maging ganun din yung gawin ko para give and take lang siya. So andito ngayon si Mix Venus para i-reiterate sa atin yung SOGIESC 101.
Ayan, thank you so much for that, Ruben. And tama ka, ako din naman, I mean tayong lahat, dumadaan sa proseso na unlearning, learning, and relearning things. First of all, we have to unlearn lahat ng mga tinuro sa atin na lipunan na mali. na hindi tama, hindi totoo about the LGBTQI community, then we have to learn about SOGIESC. We have to learn about ourselves. We have to learn about our community. And every day talaga, kailangan nating i-relearn at i-relearn yung mga bagay na to. So what I will do today is a very, very quick introduction to SOGIESC. So parang 10 to 15-minute challenge to. Because usually we do this minimum 45 minutes, 1 hour. But let's try our best to condense the discussion into 10 minutes. Ayan. So first of all, I think yung SOGIESC as a framework, as a concept, parang it sounds intimidating, no? Kasi SOGIESC, ilang letter yan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 letters. Tapos each letter may meaning. Tapos iba-iba pa yung meaning ng mga concepts na yan. Pero if you look at it at the end of the day, they just answer 4 basic questions. And I think tayong lahat, alam na natin yung tanong, di ba, for ourselves. So for example, SO or sexual orientation, it answers the question, kanino ka nagkakabit? Diba? So you can answer, ay nagkakabit ako sa kaklase ko or sa kapitbahay ko. Or di ko alam. Or hindi ako nagkakabit towards any gender. So pwedeng ganon. So there are many different answers that I know kayong lahat alam niyo na. GI, ano ang pagtingin mo sa sarili mo? Pwedeng you view yourself as a woman, as a man, or hindi ka sure, or hindi mo alam. GE, paano mo ipinapahayag kung sino ka? And SC or sex characteristics, ano ang iyong sex characteristics? So SOGIESC or sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics is composed of 4 different concepts. The concepts of sexuality or sexual orientation, of gender, divided into gender identity and gender expression, and sex or sex characteristics. So before we discuss the more technical terms, I want you to internalize all these questions, to ask yourself, ano ba yung answers mo sa mga questions na to? And more or less, alam nyo na kung ano yung SOGIESC nyo. But what advocates are doing is to give you the language, to teach you the terms, the labels that the community uses para mas maipahayag natin yung mga sarili natin in a better way. Ayan. So first of all, we need to understand that sex, gender, and sexuality are diverse. So hindi sila binaries. So hindi sila man and woman lang, pero ang dami-daming different genders, different sexualities, and even different sex characteristics. Ayan. Next, and I think pinaka-basic, lahat ng tao ay may SOGIESC. SOGIESC is part of human identity in the same way that our age, race, religion, nationality, and ability or disability are part of our identity. They tell us about who we are. So the only reason why LGBTQI people and feminists are the ones talking about SOGIESC is because women and queer people are most oppressed due to their SOGIESC. So everyone has SOGIESC, pero yung na-oppressed because of their SOGIESC ay ang ating mga kapatid na kababaihan at LGBTQI. Ayan. And lastly, only you can determine your own SOGI. So it is never your business to assume a person's SOGI or out them to others. So because SOGI is an identity, diba, it's personal, ikaw lang mismo ang makapagsabi kung sino ka, kung kanino ka na-attract. So in the same way, hindi natin dapat i-assume or i-dictate yung SOGI ng iba. And most importantly, we shouldn't out closeted LGBTQI people to others. Ayan. So napakahabang introduction, but let's go to the SOGIESC alphabet. So again, let's recall na everyone has SOGI. Everyone has SOGIESC. It's part of human identity. So the first concept of SOGIESC is also the most basic. Ito na yung alam nating lahat. And it's sex characteristics. So sex characteristics refer to physical traits that indicate biological sex, like chromosomes, genitalia, gonads, hormones, and reproductive organs. So sex characteristics, simply speaking, talks about biology, talks about physiology, ang ating mga physical na characteristics. So merong 3 classifications based on sex characteristics. Ito ang female, male, at intersex. So familiar na tayo lahat sa female at male na anatomy kasi tinuturo na ito sa atin ng grade school, di ba? Sabi ng ating science teacher, ng female anatomy daw, dapat XY chromosomes, may estrogen, may uterus, may vagina, may ovaries. Yung male anatomy daw, dapat XX chromosomes, may penis, may testosterone, may testes, etc. etc. Pero in reality, it's not as simple as that. Diba? Hindi ganun ka dali ang konsepto ng sex. Sex also actually exists on a spectrum. Diba? When we say spectrum, it's not just a binary na dalawa lang. Pero, meron pang many different possibilities. So, I'm not sure if you can read the text, pero what it's saying is, yung pinaka-right at pinaka-left, ito yung mga typical biological male at typical biological female. O yung sinabi ko kanina na kung female, XY, estrogen, kung male, XX, then testes. Pero, sa gitna, ang dami pang different patterns, different possibilities, different ways to be a human person, to manifest your sex characteristics. Ang dami pang different sex characteristics na combinations. So we call some of those people as our intersex siblings or people with intersex traits. So people with intersex traits are people whose primary and or secondary sex characteristics differ from the two expected patterns of female and male. So hindi mo masasabi if like female to or male to, hindi ganun ka-clear, hindi ganun ka-simple. So yung intersex, it's not a new phenomenon and certainly hindi sila super konti lang. Around 0.05 and 1.7% of the global population have intersex traits. So roughly speaking, we're talking about over 100 million people, diba? 70 to 100 million people, around the same size of the Philippines, the same population of the Philippines. So ganun karami ang ating mga siblings with intersex traits. So when we talk about intersex people, we usually use it as an adjective. So they are an intersex person, they are intersex, etc., etc. Intersex people have been around for so long. Pero recently lang natin na-develop yung language. And that is because yung umiiral na konsepto ay sex assigned at birth, which is a social construct of sex which is only based on genitalia. So in other words, if sex characteristics in reality include intersex people, yung sex assigned at birth or yung konsepto natin ngayon only includes female and male, vagina and penis. So ganun ka binary na pag-iisip. So hindi lang nila ine-erase yung intersex people, kundi meron ding outright violence and discrimination against our intersex siblings. So for example, yung mga babies na merong intersex traits, pag panganak nila, tapos nakita ng doktor at ng mga magulang nila na, bakit hindi to penis? Bakit hindi to vagina? So yung ginagawa ay kahit hindi naman kailangan, hindi naman necessary for their health, nasasubject sila to genital surgery. Diba? So inoperahan sila ng baby sila. Tapos this creates problems later on when they grow up. Kasi for example, inoperahan sila ng baby sila para maging penis. Tapos when they undergo puberty, mas nagma-manifest yung female sex characteristics. In short, nag-enlarge yung breast, nag-menstruate sila, etc. etc. So nagkakaroon ng problem of identity yung bata, yung tao. Ayan. So aside from that, of course, intersex people also experience discrimination because of their atypical bodies. So there are intersex people who are seen as normal, or seen as sinful, or mayroon nga ding iba na sinasabi na anak daw sila ng mga demonyo because of their abnormal traits. So obviously, science would tell us na hindi yon totoo lahat. And having intersex traits is just as normal as having non-intersex traits, having female or male sex characteristics. Ayan. So again, sex characteristics, female, male, at intersex. Sex characteristics, andun yung usapin ng katawan. Yung gender identity naman, it's our innermost concept of self. in terms of gender as a woman, a man, and or another identity. So gender identity has something more to do with our self-identification. So our internal sense of self. So when we talk about gender identity, we usually use the term cisgender or cis and transgender or trans. So yung cisgender, simple lang yan. Kung yung pinanganak ka, tapos sabi ng doktor na babae ka, tapos paglaki mo, ang pagtingin mo sa sarili mo ay babae, then ikaw ay cisgender na babae. So the same goes for cis men. Cisgender men are men who were assigned male at birth. Or in short, pagpanganak nila, may penis sila, sabi ng doktor, lalaki sila. Yung transgender naman, these are people whose gender identity is different from their gender assigned at birth. So for example, a trans man is a man who was assigned female at birth. So yung trans man, pagpanganak ng isang trans man, sabi ng doktor, pagkita nila sa baby, na babae ka. Pero that person, when they grow up, when nakilala nila yung sarili nila, they actually identify as a man. So they're actually men. Ayan. So when we talk about transgender people, we use transgender as an adjective. So, for example, she's a trans woman, dalawang words yan. Ayan. Pero then again, di ba, yung gender, hindi lang naman dalawa. Hindi siya binary. It's actually a spectrum. It's actually different spectrums. So, dyan po pasok yung ating non-binary siblings. So, non-binary people are people who do not exclusively identify as either a man or a woman. So, in short, merong mga non-binary people na lalaki, meron ding non-binary people na babae, pero hindi lang yun yung gender nila. So, hindi exclusively men at hindi rin exclusively women. So, pwedeng agender, walang gender. Pwedeng bi-gender, dalawa yung gender. So, pwedeng lalaki siya and babae at the same time. Pwedeng gender fluid. Nag-iiba-iba over time yung gender. So when we talk about transgender people, andyan yung trans men, trans women, and non-binary people. So it's actually an umbrella of different identities. Ayan. So sa gender identity naman, yung ating mga transgender na kapatid yung na-discriminate, na-violate. So kung meron tayong COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, meron din tayong epidemic of violence against transgender people. For example, in 2020 alone, 350 people were killed because they were trans. So transgender sila, pinatay sila just because they are transgender. So ganun kalala yung violence against transgender. All because society cannot accept the fact that people can be a different gender. Diba? That people can express their gender differently. So kung ang gender identity is internal, gender expression is external. It's how we manifest or express our gender. So sa gender expression, yung major classifications ay masculine, feminine, at androgynous. So kung gender non-conforming ang isang tao, ang ibig sabihin nun, a gender non-conforming person is a person whose gender expression does not match their gender identity. So for example, di ba, ang mga babae, sabi ng lipunan, dapat feminine. So kung may isang babae na masculine or androgynous, ang androgynous, that means a mix of masculine and feminine. So when a woman is androgynous or masculine, that woman is gender non-conforming. In the same way that a man who is feminine or androgynous is gender non-conforming. So in short, ito yung mga FM na mga bakla or yung mga tomboy. Diba? Because they are men and women, but they do not follow the gender norms associated with their gender. And sobrang lala ng violence against gender non-conforming people. So for example, in schools, andyan pa rin yung gender uniform restrictions. Andyan pa rin yung haircut policy. So andyan din, sobrang lala ng bullying. Ayan. So we're on to our last. I hope hindi ako sobrang tagal at na-fulfill ko yung 15-minute challenge. So the last concept in SOGIESC, and the first in the alphabet, is sexual orientation. So sex characteristics, it has something to do with their bodies, gender identity, internal sense of self, gender expression, outward manifestation. Sexual orientation is attraction. It's physical or sexual attraction towards other people on the basis of gender. So if you're heterosexual, you are attracted to people of a different gender. So if lalaki ka attracted to babae, you are heterosexual. Then gay or lesbian people naman, people attracted to the same gender. So if lalaki ka na nagkakagusto sa lalaki exclusively, then you are a gay man. Bisexual, umbrella term for people attracted to more than one gender. So, more than one gender kasi alam natin na hindi lang dalawa yung gender. Maraming iba't ibang gender. Pero pasok pa rin dito yung traditional definition of bisexual. Under pa rin dito yung attraction to men and women. Pero aside from that, kasali rin yung ating pansexual siblings na na-attract regardless of gender. Sexually fluid siblings na yung attraction nila nag-vary over time. Ayan. And lastly, yung asexual naman, these are people who experience little to no sexual attraction. So take note, little to no, hindi lang no. So for example, meron ding mga asexual people who experience sexual attraction. Example, demisexual people have sexual attraction after close emotional bond is formed. So kailangan mo na may emotional connection bago maka-feel ng sexual attraction. So yan, so in very broad strokes, in very quick explanations, yun yung SOGIESC concept. So if you want to learn more about SOGIESC and pagod kayo makinig ng 1 or 2 hour session, you could just look up the gender elephant or the gender unicorn. So it, in a graphic manner, it displays SOGIESC quite simply. So, pwedeng gender elephant or gender unicorn, yun yung mga updated na graphic representations of SOGIESC. Ayan, so balik tayo sa inyo, Cheska, Ben, and Nathalie. Sana hindi ako masyadong nagtagal sa explanation natin ng SOGIESC.
Ayan. Thank you so much, Mix Venus. Actually, ang dami kong natutunan, no, Nath, Ben. Natutunan ko na parang, syempre alam na natin yung ibang part, lalo yung sa sexual characteristics na male and female. So, it excited me a lot kasi syempre, science, kinonect din ni Mix Venus ang everything sa science. So, it's not just a social construct or whatever they're calling it. Actually, may scientific explanation na pwede nating ibigay. And of course, natutunan ko din na meron din tayong mga gender identity as well as gender expression na pwede nating iba yung express natin dun sa gender identity natin. Kayo ba, Nath and Ben?
Ikaw muna, Ben, o ako na?
Go.
Ayun. So, ayun nga, totoo, no, na parang kahit ako, patuloy pa din ako na natututo sa mga gantong discussion, no? Kaya parang importante rin talaga na nag-engage tayo sa mga gantong discussions, gantong topics para patuloy na nagbibigay siya ng awareness, ng information tungkol sa mga gantong bagay. And as we aim, no, sa Pride, gusto ko i-reiterate yung intersex is normal. So, sa mga kapatid natin dyan na feeling nyo hindi siya normal o masyado, parang na-absorb nyo ba yung sinasabi ng ibang tao sa inyo tungkol sa gender identity nyo, gender expression nyo, it's totally normal. Okay lang, ilabas nyo kung sino kayo kasi yun nga, normal lang siya na it really exists. Ayun. Ikaw naman, Ruben.
Ayan. Isa din kasi sa mga dahilan kung bakit pinupush talaga natin tong mga gantong platforms na pag-usapan yung mga SOGI ganon is yung laganap na misgendering, yung ganon. Familiar kayo. It's siya, parang once na mag-assume ka na without asking that person kung anong gender niya, you are misgendering him na or her ganon. So kaya importante dito papasok yung mga pronouns natin. Ayan, yung mga ganyan, they, them, he, him. So, personally, pagpasok ko ng college, gano'n, nagulat ako. Bakit may mga gantong nag-i-exist, ganito? Ano to, para saan to, mga gano'n. So, parang inano ko siya. Hindi ko siya tinignang bad side. Tinignan ko siya parang, ayun nga, isa sa mga dahilan ko bakit ang laking tulong ng mga organizations din talaga sa atin. Sila yung
Totoo.
parang mag-aalis sa atin sa comfort zone natin, gano'n. Kaya parang isa din dito papasok yung misgendering nga. Kaya yun, yung pronouns din talaga.
And of course nga, yun nga, let me correct myself. Kanina, mali yung nagamit kong pronouns kay Mix Venus. I used she, her, pero yung pronouns ni Mix Venus ay they, them. So, dun papasok yung una nating question kay Mix Venus, no? So, paano, explain naman po natin sa mga audience natin, sa ating mga kausap, kung paano nga ba ginagamit usually ng mga katauhan ang pronouns?
Ayan. So ating diskurso on pronouns, it's really part of our movement to affirm gender. So ina-affirm natin na yung gender ng isang tao ay siya lang ang makapag-determine. At ina-affirm natin na yung gender expression ng tao, paano pinapahayag yung sarili niya through name, behavior, pronouns, clothing, ay entirely their own business. So when we talk about pronouns, what we're actually normalizing is a fact na hindi dapat tayo mag-assume ng pronouns. So, yung pronouns ng isang tao ay pwedeng hindi nag-match ng kanilang gender identity. So, for example, there are men and women who are increasingly using they, them as their pronouns. In the same way that there are non-binary people, aside from using they, them, gumagamit din ng she, her, at he, him at the same time. So, what we're trying to do is nino-normalize natin yung first, pagiging visible about pronouns. So, nilalagay sa bio natin, sa social media, even sa email signature ng mga advocates, yung kanilang pronouns para people can be sure how to address them. And second of all, ni-normalize din natin yung pagtanong ng pronouns and yung pangalan. Kasi aside from knowing the name of that person, of course, may mga times, di ba, na hindi naman natin parati masasabi yung name. Di ba? Yan yung grammatical purpose ng pronouns. It's an alternative for a name para hindi yung name yung parating masabi. So, kailangan din natin malaman yung pronouns nila. So, how do people use this? Many different ways. So, for example, merong mga tao, ang dami ng mga tao na gumagamit ng they, them pronouns. And they, them as singular pronouns are valid. Even before pa, hundreds of years, sa history ng English language, tinuruan kami, mga English majors, na for example, sa works ni Shakespeare, or even before pa, may mga writers who use they, them as gender-neutral pronouns to refer to someone na hindi nila kilala, na hindi nila alam yung gender. And ngayon, sa context ng 20th century, mas ina-assert natin na yung they, them, singular pronouns yan. Ayun.
Ayan. Thank you so much for clarifying that part, Mix Vino. So, siguro pagpunta na tayo sa mga katanungan ng mga estudyante natin. No? Simulan po ni Ben yung unang tanong.
Dagdag ko lang dun sa sinabi ni Mix Venus. Kaya parang, tawag dito, nag-exist agad talaga din. Maganda na nag-exist yung mga gender-neutral pronouns ngayon na be, Lods, Mars. Pag hindi tayo sure ganun, quiz, mga ganyan.
Totoo.
True.
Diba?
It's
Tapos
actually it's a sign of respect na din sa tao na kausap mo or tinutukoy mo na parang importante rin talaga na alamin yung pronouns kasi it's a simple way to show respect.
Totoo. At saka dagdag dun kay Ruben na sinabi, maganda nga kasi parang nag-a-adapt na din yung Filipino language. Which is, alam naman natin ang ating society is very patriarchal in nature, even sa constitution natin and everything. But maganda na nag-a-adapt na din yung language natin and yung society. Ayan, sige Ben, pasok na.
Ayan. Kasama nga ng kaya pinupush din natin tong SOGIE is yung SOGIE bill din. Ayan, sabi dito. Anong opinion nyo about sa sinasabi nilang nagiging super elite class daw po ang LGBTQIA+ community compared to the rest in terms of passing the SOGIE
Ayan. So thank you so much for that wonderful question. So indeed, ever since unang final yung SOGIEC Quality Bill noong 2000, year 2000, yan talaga yung tanong na binabato sa amin. Bakit kailangan pa ng SOGIEC Equality Bill? Hindi ba nagiging special and elite class yung LGBTQI community? So obviously, hindi yan totoo. Kasi first of all, yung bill itself only asks to prohibit discrimination. So hindi niya sinasabi na lahat ng bakla makakuha ng 20,000 pesos each. Hindi niya sinasabi na i-prioritize yung mga bakla sa mga ospital. So wala siyang sinabi ng ganon. 'Di ba? What it only says is dapat yung discrimination sa edukasyon, sa trabaho, sa healthcare, sa mga public and private establishments, dapat all forms of discrimination prohibited. Bakit? Kasi basic human right yon. It's a basic human right to be educated. It's a basic human right to access healthcare. 'Di ba? So, yung bill itself, it's not asking for much. It's just asking for basic human rights, for equality lang. And second of all, hindi totoo na nagiging special and elite class yung community kasi alam natin sa ating realities ngayon na marginalized yung LGBTQI community. Alam natin na sa kanilang mga tahanan, marami pa ring LGBTQI ng mga kabataan na hindi tanggap at inaabuso ng kanilang mga magulang. Alam natin na meron pa ring pinapaalis sa trabaho just because they're LGBTQI. And alam natin na sa mga lansangan, merong hinaharas, inaabuso, and even pinapatay just of their SOGIESC. So nasaan doon ang special and elite class? So I don't see it. And if gagamitin natin ang ating mga senses, ang ating mga utak, hindi tayo makapagsabi na special and elite class yung LGBTQI community at na hindi na kailangan ng
Ayan. So, pumasok nga po dun sinabi niyo na napakaraming issue regarding the LGBTQI community, lalo na yung pagpasa ng SOGI bill natin. And andyan nga po yung pagtaas ng pagpatay sa mga LGBTQI sisters, siblings natin, brothers, everything. And then andyan din po yung discrimination na binibigay sa ating kapwa. Sa tingin niyo po, what is the role, sabi dito, of every member of the LGBTQI community sa iba't ibang issue that are circulating in the society nowadays?
Yeah. I think yung pinaka-important role natin ngayon is to tell our stories. So as LGBTQI people, we need to tell our stories. Especially now that marami ng platforms na queer-friendly. Maraming platforms that want to highlight queer narrative. So let's tell our stories, both the good and the bad. So let's tell stories of hope, of happiness, of empowerment, of survival. And at the same time, we should also tell stories of discrimination, of violence, of harassment, of abuse. Because yung dalawang yon, yung good and bad, they most accurately reflect our reality in the Philippines. Because even if tolerated tayo, so hindi naman lahat ng LGBTQI kinukulong or pinapatay. So may level of tolerance. Pero hindi pa rin tayo fully accepted. So we need to tell both the good and the bad story. So I think that's our most important role today. And of course, second, we need to be mobilized. So what do we mean by magmobiliza tayo? So if you have organizations, if you have groups in your communities, in your schools, na LGBTQI or allies, join those groups, join those organizations. Or even as individuals, di ba? Be politically conscious, di ba? Join campaigns for the SOGIEC Equality Bill, join campaigns for marriage equality, join campaigns for LGBTQI rights. So it's very important na aside from living our truth, aside from existing, aside from being proud of who we are, kailangan rin natin mag-take ng stand. We should also take a stand and we should also do something about oppression.
Ayan. At saka ang magandang bagay po dito, hindi man lahat nakikinig, pero at least, di ba, may nakikinig kahit ano pang gender sila. Ayan. So, Nath?
Ayun, no. Totoo, no, na parang parang makiisa ka sa pag-organize, sa pag-advocate kasi the larger we are, the stronger the movement will be, no? As what we do sa SCAP, na ganun yung gusto natin mangyari, na mag-organize pa tayo para mas progresibo, mas maririnig tayo na at talagang these issues exist nga talaga sa society natin. And pag napakinggan tayo, it will do better sa society natin kasi we're advocating for safe spaces nga in our country, syempre. And for our final question, well, beauty pageant pala to, Charing. How do you see pride as a progression to a safer, equal, and just society?
Yeah, so as I said, when we started, sobrang yaman, sobrang haba ng ating history of pride. The tradition of pride can be traced back to the work of our mothers in the advocacy in the 1990s. And of course, globally, yung tradition ng pride, matitrace natin sa Stonewall in 1969. But right now, we are faced with more or less the same challenges, the same threats to our existence, to our rights, to our freedoms. So kailangan na patuloy gamitin natin yung pride as a platform for protest. So pride is celebration and protest. Through pride, we celebrate our identities. We celebrate who we are. We celebrate our victories, our achievements so far sa ating paglaban for our rights. And at the same time, we also continue fighting for our rights. We also continue to take a stand against oppressive structures in society. So pride should always be a safe space for critical thought, for free discussion, and most importantly, for resistance. So in the future, 'di ba, ang dami pa nating kailangan i-achieve. Ang dami pa nating kailangan gawin. The Social Equality Bill or an anti-discrimination law, which is the most basic, diba, sa lahat ng lipunan in terms of LGBTQ advocacy, yan dapat yung pinakauna, anti-discrimination law. And the fact that in the Philippines, wala pa tayong ganon, it just goes to show na ang layo pa ng kailangan nating marating. So, pride should continue being the radical platform that it is today. So, it is our job as advocates, as activists, and as allies to continue making pride a safe space for all of those things. So, patuloy lang tayong lumaban and patuloy tayong sumama sa ating community para sa ating karapatan.
Ayan, thank you talaga, Mix Venus. Kasi parang it is less about hindi maunawaan. It is more about hindi matanggap na yung homophobia, discrimination, transphobia is nanggagaling lang sa isang sistema. Nanggagaling lang talaga sa isang rotten system. Kaya yung discrimination nag-escalate siya sa isang violence. Kaya kailangan nating kailangan natin tuldukan. Kailangan nating lagyan ng end. We need to put end on this. Kaya parang isa sa magandang, ikaw na nakikinig nito, isa sa mga kung hindi ka pa bukas, hindi ka pa tawag dito, parang you're not into this discussion, ganon. Simulan mo na, wala namang masama eh. Sabi nga nila, di ba, it's better the at least kesa sa what ifs. At least, paano pag hindi nag-work? At least you tried. Ang pangit pakinggan, di ba, kapag paano hindi nag-work? Eh what if trinay ko? What if pinustro ko? Di ba? So, maganda kahit isang movement lang yan, magdo-domino effect yan. Isang movement, isang step lang siya, magdo-domino effect, sunod-sunod na yung mga discussion, sunod-sunod na yung mga pasok sa'yo, kahit maging sabog na siya, at least, alam mo, na-visualize mo. Ganun, nagko-connect siya. Nagko-connect na dots. Tari na connect. Ayan, kaya go na, put an end on it. Laban tayo.
Ikaw naman, Cheska.
Ayan. So siguro to wrap up lang, kanina pa kasi din ako nagbibigay ng insights ko regarding dun sa mga nasabi nga sa atin at bago ko natutunan mula kay Mix Venus. Siguro ako naman, ako kasi advocacy ko talaga ang pagkakaroon ng safe space, lalo na ang establishment ng safe space in our university. And nung una kasi, pinagdidiinan ko lang na we need a safe space for women. We need a safe space for men and women. But ang hindi ko napagtuunan ng pansin dati is that we need a safe space for the LGBTQI community kasi sila mismo nakakaramdam din sila ng discrimination. At ang gusto kasi natin, nagpa-plant tayo ng seeds. Maganda na merong mga grupo katulad natin, no, ng SCAP at saka ng grupo ni na Mix Venus, no. Maganda kasi nagsisimula tayo. We're planting seeds that our future siblings will cultivate years from now or even days or months from now. And yun nga, sabi nga nung isang favorite, nakita ko lang siya ng neto lang yun eh. So naging favorite quote ko na siya. So sabi is that never doubt that a small group of citizen or a small group of a thoughtful citizen can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that it has ever had. So, ayun. So, let us all not stop on establishing a safe space for our community. Let us all advocate for a safe space wherein lahat tayo mafe-feel natin na equal tayong lahat. Yung hindi natin mafe-feel na may takot tayo, yung hindi natin mafe-feel na hindi ko nararamdaman yung equal access sa everything na kailangan nating ma-access. So basic human rights, yun nga, kumbaga. So ayun, yun lang naman yung mga nakuha ko ngayon. Actually, madami pa akong natutunan ngayong araw na to. But sige, bibigay ko na sa'yo yung floor, Natalie.
Ayan. So, ako naman, siguro, ang mabibigay ko sa mga lahat na nanonood dyan, hello, charot, TV lang. Hindi. Ang may iwan ko is, ano pinagkaiba ng LGBTQIA+ rights sa basic human rights? Kasi tao din naman kami dito na nagsasalita ngayon. Tao din kami, we don't ask for special treatment. Discrimination din siya. Hindi, kasi ang lawak din ng discrimination, di ba? Pero hindi talaga siya naiiba kasi kung dinidiscriminate mo kami, dahil ganito kami, it's just like human discrimination as well. Kaya, yung gantong problema, gantong issue sa lipunan, hindi talaga siya madaling solusyonan o madaling tapusin. At alam ko, kahit ako, minsan napapagod din ako na parang lumaban at mag-advocate pa at mag-share ng opinion. Pero, it's better to look at the brighter side na yung maliliit na hakbang natin, kahit mga individual citizens, yung maliliit na hakbang, yung simpleng pag-share mo lang ng opinions mo, pag-contribute sa mga gantong discussions, it will contribute into something bigger na parang you're influencing other people din to join you sa gantong movement. And ako, isang statement na pinapaniwalaan ko bilang isang student and youth leader, bilang advocate din for safe spaces, if something's wrong, instill change. And yun yung nakalagay sa bio ko sa Facebook. Ganon. Kasi I'd rather do something para may mabago ako kesa naman na alam ko sa sarili kong may magagawa ako pero tinalikuran ko. 'Di ba? Tulad nga ng sinabi ni Ben, what if? It's better na sumubok ka kaysa sa wala kang nagawa. Kaya ikaw na nanonood, simulan mo na, sumama ka na sa amin sa pag-advocate sa mga safe spaces. And this ends our masayang uskapan.
Mga usapan laban sa progresibong bayan.
Kung saan ka masaya, doon ka happy. See you mga ka-USCAP hanggang sa muling episode on June 30. Muli, ako ang Baby Cakes na nagsasabing magpabakuna mula sa lalawigan ng Laguna. I am Cheska.
And I am Ruben. Been there, done that.
At ako ang lalaban para sa karapatan at kapakanan ng mga hayop. I'm Nath. Tara!
Tara!
Uskap tayo!